Hello, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a story of ingenuity that changed the course of naval history, yet almost went unnoticed. It's the tale of a humble welder in 1941, who believed there had to be a better way to assemble submarines faster and more efficiently. But what if I told you that this one idea, rejected by authorities and dismissed as impractical, would eventually save over 50 million man-hours and revolutionize shipbuilding forever? Imagine a process so slow that installing a single section of deck took more than a week, with dozens of workers laboring in cramped, dark compartments, scaffolding crisscrossing every inch. How many hours of tedious drilling, bolting, and fitting do you think that adds up to across hundreds of ships? What if instead, you could weld entire decks from above in less than a second per fastener? And what if this simple innovation could be secretly developed by a single man in his garage, ignored by the Navy, yet destined to become a wartime necessity? Could one person's quiet experiment truly change the fate of a nation's war effort? The central question is, how could a rejected idea, dismissed as too simple or unorthodox, end up saving millions of hours, winning battles, and earning a prestigious Navy award? In this video, we'll trace the journey of Ted Nelson, whose breakthrough welding method, initially mocked and ignored, became the backbone of wartime shipbuilding, accelerating construction from years to months. We'll see how his invention was almost lost to bureaucracy, yet ultimately recognized as a vital contribution, transforming industries, saving countless lives, and proving that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the most unlikely sources. So, stay with us, because the most fascinating part is just about to begin. The story of how one man's simple idea reshaped history starts right now. In the dimly lit interior of the submarine construction bay at Mayor Island Naval Shipyard in California, the flickering flame of a welding torch cast fleeting shadows across the cluttered workspace. It was March of 1941, a time when the urgency of wartime mobilization was beginning to tighten its grip on every facet of American industry. Amidst this scene, Edward Nelson, a humble welder earning just over $1 for each day's labor, carefully recorded his mounting frustrations in a battered notebook that had seen better days. Deep down, he believed there had to be a more effective way to do things. The current methods felt like a waste of precious time and effort, bordering on the absurd. Despite the relentless pressure from Navy supervisors to increase productivity, Nelson had repeatedly found himself dismissed when suggesting improvements. As he navigated through the labyrinthine scaffolding beneath the newly built wooden decks of a submarine under assembly, he couldn't shake the anger that boiled inside him. The scene before him was a testament to the inefficiency of traditional construction techniques. A dozen men spent an entire shift, more than 8 hours, just to install a single section of deck planking. Enormous scaffolding structures filled the compartments beneath each wooden surface, crammed with workers wielding wrenches and twisting nuts onto bolts that extended from above. Hours of painstaking labor went into fastening these wooden planks onto steel frames, a procedure demanding meticulous precision, patience, and valuable time. This labor-intensive process was a standard practice that had persisted for decades, unchanged despite the rapid buildup of war tensions across the Pacific. Yet, here, at what would soon become one of the most active shipyards in the world, such antiquated methods persisted, seemingly unchallenged. Theodore Edward Nelson, a man of 36 with roots firmly planted in California, had earned his mechanical knowledge through years of hands-on experience. Over the span of 15 years, he had worked in machine shops scattered across the state, learning firsthand how metals responded under various conditions, how electricity could be harnessed efficiently, and how to troubleshoot complex problems, if only someone was willing to listen. Unbeknownst to the Navy supervisors who dismissed his ideas, Nelson had already devised a solution to the painstaking attachment process that plagued his colleagues. What he did not yet realize was that his simple, elegant idea, which was rejected and brushed aside by those in authority, would, in the course of time, save the U.S. Navy more than 50 million man-hours and revolutionize naval construction forever. The seed of this transformation had been planted weeks earlier, deep within the cramped, often stifling corridors below decks, where the daily battle against inefficiency raged fiercely. The date was March 15, 1941, a little over 8 months before the attack on Pearl Harbor, a moment that would ultimately thrust the United States into global conflict. That spring, the Mayor Island Naval Shipyard sprawled across 635 acres along the Napa River in Vallejo, California, roughly 25 miles northeast of San Francisco. This historic site, founded in 1854 by Commander David Glasgow Farragut, had been the nation's first naval base established on the Pacific Ocean, and by early 1941, it had transformed into the foremost submarine construction hub on the West Coast. The yard was operating around the clock, running 3 shifts of workers every day, 7 days a week, as the pace of submarine production dramatically increased in response to mounting tensions with Japan. At that time, approximately 12,000 civilian workers were employed at Mayor Island, a number set to swell to nearly 50,000 by 1944. Among these workers was Ted Nelson, known initially by his employee number 3872. He earned just over $11 per day, working diligently during the day shift from dawn at 7 until late afternoon at 4. His primary responsibility was welding, primarily on submarine hulls and internal structures, a task he performed with skill and speed. Yet, despite his proficiency, Nelson's growing dissatisfaction with the sluggish, inefficient methods used in his work persisted. The limitations of the traditional approach to attaching the wooden decks, which involved hours of manual labor for minimal gains, became increasingly apparent to him. Developing alternative methods had become more than a mere personal itch. It was a necessity born from the pressing demands of wartime production and the realization that many of these processes could be significantly optimized. Little did Nelson know then that his quiet experimentation and inventive spirit would soon set into motion a chain of events that would reshape naval construction practices, saving countless hours and transforming the way ships, especially submarines, were built in the American war effort. Everywhere he looked, the problem was glaringly obvious. The tedious, labor-intensive process of installing wooden deck planking on submarines, destroyers, and aircraft carriers had become an almost insurmountable obstacle. For years, the Navy had insisted on using wood for decks, and for several valid reasons. Firstly, wood offered superior grip in wet conditions, significantly reducing slips and accidents during crew movements. Its quieter nature meant personnel could move about more discreetly, an advantage during sensitive operations or stealth missions. Additionally, wooden decks provided some insulation against the cold steel beneath them, making the environment more bearable for crew members. In the event of fire, wooden surfaces could be repaired or replaced far more swiftly than welded steel plates, which required extensive welding and specialized equipment. However, despite these advantages, the method of installation remained outdated and inefficient. The process was both archaic and painfully slow, still relying on techniques unchanged since the days of the First World War. Each step was complicated and laborious, demanding meticulous attention and a significant amount of time. The first step involved workers drilling holes through the wooden planks at precisely measured intervals, ensuring consistency and proper alignment. These holes were then countersunk so that the heads of the attachment bolts could sit flush with the deck surface, avoiding any protrusions that could cause tripping hazards or damage. Following this, the workers carefully positioned the planks over the steel deck framework. Yet, this was only the beginning of a complex and grueling process. The real challenge lay beneath the surface. Workers had to construct extensive scaffolding inside the submarine or ship's compartments, often requiring multiple levels of platforms. This scaffolding was essential to provide safe access to the underside of the steel framework, which was often cramped and dark. Setting up this scaffolding was itself a monumental task, taking up to 2 days just for construction, plus additional time for dismantling once the job was done. With the scaffolding in place, the work on the deck could truly commence, and it was arduous. Teams above and below the deck had to coordinate precisely to insert long threaded bolts through the wooden planks and into the steel framework beneath. Below deck, workers, often cramped in barely lit spaces with just enough room to move, would stand on scaffolding platforms, threading nuts onto the protruding bolt ends. These nuts had to be tightened securely with wrenches, pulling the wooden planks tight against the underlying steel framework to ensure stability and durability. Once secured, the workers on deck would fill the countersunk holes with wooden plugs, creating a smooth, even surface. This entire procedure was painstaking and had to be repeated for every section of decking, no matter how small. On a submarine, this process could involve covering several hundred square feet, requiring thousands of individual attachment points. An aircraft carrier's flight deck, covering tens of thousands of square feet, made the task even more daunting. The amount of labor involved was staggering, straining manpower and resources alike. Typically, a submarine deck installation involved a crew of anywhere from 12 to 16 workers, working diligently for anywhere from 5 to 7 days to complete the job. The scaffolding alone demanded at least 2 days for construction and another day for dismantling. The actual task of bolt installation took up the remaining time, testing the patience and endurance of everyone involved. Ted Nelson had performed this demanding work dozens of times. He knew the routine inside and out, standing on scaffolding platforms in confined submarine compartments barely 4 feet high, threading nuts onto bolts with strained backs from constant bending, and suffering the scars on his knuckles from slipped wrenches. His body ached, his patience wore thin, and yet, more than his personal discomfort, Nelson felt a deeper frustration. He was acutely aware of the broader implications of what this labor-intensive process represented in the context of imminent war. Everyone at Mayor Island knew the tense reality. War was approaching. The naval yard was already falling behind schedule on the construction of submarines and other vessels. There was a pressing need to get ships into the water, not stuck in dry dock waiting for endless deck installations. Every delay risked pushing the Navy further back in readiness at a time when swift preparedness could make the difference between victory and defeat. Nelson understood all too well that the nation was not yet fully ready for conflict, and he believed there had to be a better way to handle this tedious process. His mind kept returning to the persistent inefficiency, contemplating solutions that could streamline or even revolutionize the entire deck installation procedure, if only someone would listen. For months, Nelson had been turning this concept over in his mind during the long, monotonous hours spent at his welding station, contemplating the persistent challenges of naval construction. The solution appeared so straightforward that it almost seemed obvious once it finally dawned on him. Instead of the traditional method of attaching components, bolting from above and threading nuts from below, why not consider welding attachment studs directly onto the steel framework in a more efficient manner? His idea was to eliminate the cumbersome process of installing nuts and bolts underneath the structure, which often required scaffolding and working in cramped, hard-to-reach spaces. Instead, he envisioned welding a series of small, headless bolts, what he called studs, straight onto the steel deck from the top side only. With this approach, the entire operation could be performed rapidly, producing strong, permanent welds without the need for complex, time-consuming procedures or additional personnel working beneath the deck. The concept was simple but effective. Weld from one side exclusively, avoiding the need for coordination between multiple crews, reducing labor, and minimizing downtime. Nelson's design centered on using threaded studs, which could be welded onto the steel in fractions of a second. The wooden planks that would later form the deck could be equipped with threaded inserts or specialized nuts designed to connect to these studs. Once the studs were in place, attaching the decking materials became a matter of simply threading the appropriate fasteners onto the welded studs, all performed from above the deck surface. This innovation promised to streamline the entire process, significantly cutting down the time and effort required for deck assembly. He pictured a compact welding gun, handheld and easy to maneuver, equipped with a spring-loaded mechanism to press each stud firmly against the steel surface. A trigger would then produce an electrical arc that fused the stud to the steel, creating a robust weld almost instantaneously. Encasing the flux needed for welding within a small ceramic cap attached to the end of each stud would keep the flux securely in place, regardless of the stud's orientation. This way, welding could be performed in any position, vertical, overhead, or inclined, without the flux falling off or becoming ineffective. This was the crucial hurdle that had stumped welding engineers for more than 20 years. How to adapt stud welding techniques for all positional welds on naval ships, where space and orientation vary greatly. Nelson believed he had discovered the answer, so simple that he nearly laughed when the idea struck him. Instead of using loose flux powder, which was prone to falling away on inclined or vertical surfaces, he proposed encasing the flux within a small ceramic cap that would stay in place during welding. This cap would be affixed securely to the stud's end, ensuring the flux remained exactly where it was needed, regardless of the orientation. He quickly sketched his concept in the pages of his notebook, visualizing a device that combined a handheld welding gun, a spring-loaded mechanism to press the stud against the steel, an electrical trigger to initiate the arc, and a disposable ceramic flux cap on each stud. The entire operation, from positioning the stud to completing the weld, was designed to take less than a second per stud. With such a system, a single worker could install dozens of these studs in the same time it currently took to bolt and thread a handful of connections. The efficiency gained could revolutionize deck construction, reducing labor costs, cutting installation time, and eliminating the need for scaffolding or multiple crews working in coordination, especially in hard-to-access areas. Nelson envisioned this as a game-changing innovation that would streamline naval shipbuilding and improve safety, all while maintaining the integrity and strength of the welds. Feeling confident about his proposal, Nelson took his sketches and ideas to his supervisor, a Navy lieutenant named Morrison. Their meeting lasted less than 5 minutes, during which Morrison barely glanced at the drawings. His response was dismissive and curt. "We have established procedures, Mr. Nelson. We follow Navy specifications." He made it clear that any deviation from standard procedures would require formal approval, and that for now, the existing methods, however inefficient, were the authorized way to proceed. Nelson tried once more to advocate for his idea, explaining the potential savings in time and labor, as well as the reduction in scaffolding costs that could be achieved through his method. Undeterred, Nelson then approached the shipyard's chief welding engineer, a civilian contractor named Hartwell. He detailed the advantages of his concept: faster installation times, less manpower required, and the elimination of scaffolding, which could significantly decrease project costs and timelines. Hartwell listened politely, nodding with a professional demeanor, but his reply was just as dismissive. "Son," he said patiently, "people a lot smarter than you and I have been trying to solve this problem for over 20 years. If it were that simple, someone would have already done it." He explained that the Navy had strict specifications governing assembly procedures and welding practices. Any change, even for an innovative idea, had to go through a formal approval process involving the Bureau. In the midst of ongoing naval research and development efforts, the need for thorough prototype testing loomed large, often stretching out over many years. Such extensive testing was necessary to ensure the reliability and effectiveness of new designs before they could be deployed. However, Nelson found himself increasingly pressed for time. He argued that they simply did not have the luxury of waiting years to validate a new subassembly or process. The urgency of wartime demands meant that submarines had to be built without delay. Nelson voiced his concern vehemently, insisting that immediate action was essential to meet the pressing needs of the Navy. Hartwell, the project's supervisor, responded with a nonchalant shrug, clearly unmotivated by the urgency Nelson perceived. His stance was detached. He maintained that his primary responsibility was to oversee the construction of ships strictly according to the approved, established specifications. For Hartwell, deviating from these guidelines was simply not an option. Every change required a bureaucratic process that involved paperwork, approvals, and lengthy reviews. To him, this was the proper way to ensure quality and consistency, regardless of the delays it caused. Nelson, frustrated and growing more disillusioned, left the meeting with a sense of helplessness. His frustration was compounded by the fact that he had presented what he believed was a practical, innovative solution, an approach that could drastically reduce the time and effort needed to assemble submarines, saving thousands of man-hours on each vessel. Yet, his proposal had been dismissed outright, not because there was a flaw in the idea or doubt about its potential effectiveness. The real reason was simpler: he was just a welder, not an engineer or a senior officer. His suggestions were regarded as outside the formal approval process, which prioritized adherence to current procedures over innovation. Changing established procedures was an uphill battle because it involved paperwork, bureaucracy, and permission from higher authorities. The suppression of innovation in favor of rigid protocol reflected a broader cultural resistance to change, which often hindered progress during critical wartime efforts. Nevertheless, Nelson refused to give up. He made one last effort to have his idea considered seriously by drafting a formal letter addressed to the shipyard's commanding officer, Captain Thomas Withers. In this letter, Nelson carefully outlined the inefficiencies he had observed, explained his proposed solution involving stud welding, and provided an estimated timeline for how much time and money could be saved if his method were adopted. He included detailed calculations and illustrations to make his case compelling. After ensuring that the letter complied with all proper channels, he submitted it through the official suggestion procedures, trusting that his earnest effort would garner attention. Weeks passed, and Nelson received a reply, a standard form letter expressing gratitude for his initiative. It politely explained that all technical proposals were subject to evaluation by the Bureau of Ships Engineering Review Board, a distant and bureaucratic body. The letter further informed him that his suggestion had been forwarded to the review board for consideration, but that such evaluations typically took between 18 and 24 months. Nelson's heart sank at the amount of time before he might receive an answer, potentially too late to influence the outcome of the ongoing war. Frustrated, he crumpled the letter in his hand and tossed it into the wastebasket, feeling a mixture of disappointment and resolve. That evening, Nelson reached a pivotal decision, a choice that would not only transform his life but also steer the course of naval history itself. If the Navy refused to listen or consider his ideas, he would take matters into his own hands. He resolved to build his own prototype, to demonstrate conclusively that his concept worked and was more effective than the current methods. Only then would they be forced to acknowledge his innovation and consider it seriously. He cleared a space in his garage behind the modest cottage he shared with his wife, Emma, in Vallejo. As he began collecting scrap steel, old welding equipment, and various tools, Emma watched him with concern. She warned him, voicing her fears that his obsession might cost him his job, a risk he was willing to take. "Ted," she said softly, "you're going to get yourself fired if you keep this up. You're supposed to be working on Navy projects, not your own inventions." Nelson, smiling reassuringly, responded, "This will help the Navy someday. They just don't see it yet." Over the following weeks, during evenings and on weekends, Nelson diligently worked to create his first prototype of a stud welding gun. His design was rudimentary, crude, even, but functional. It consisted of a pistol grip handle, a spring-loaded plunger to hold and press the stud against the material, an electrical trigger connected to a powerful welding supply, and a quick-release mechanism for loading new studs. The most critical and innovative component was the flux cap, which he knew was crucial for proper arc initiation and strong welds. Nelson experimented tirelessly with various ceramic materials, flux compositions, and cap designs to optimize performance. After dozens of tests and refinements, he finally developed a flux cap that held flux securely, allowed for in a remarkable display of innovation and ingenuity. The advanced welding technology worked flawlessly from the very beginning. A single stud could be securely welded in less than 1 second, a feat that significantly outperformed traditional methods. The welds produced were exceptionally strong, surpassing the durability of conventional through bolts, and perhaps most notably, this new process did not require any access beneath the surface, simplifying and speeding up procedures that had previously been labor-intensive. The inventor, Ted Nelson, took his prototype to his workplace, bringing it along to demonstrate its capabilities firsthand. During the lunch break, he showcased the device to several fellow welders, who watched in amazement as the process unfolded seamlessly before their eyes. Their reactions were a mixture of fascination and enthusiasm, recognizing immediately how this technology could revolutionize their work. One of the welders commented that the invention would save them an enormous amount of time, emphasizing its practical benefits. Another suggested that Nelson should demonstrate the device to Morrison, perhaps believing that an influential decision-maker might see its potential. Nelson, however, shook his head at this advice. He explained that he had already shown Morrison the invention, but Morrison had dismissed it as unimportant or unnecessary. Disappointed but undeterred, Nelson was advised by yet another welder to consider selling his welding guns to shipyards all across the country, asserting confidently that such a move could make Nelson extraordinarily wealthy. This idea was new to him, and while Nelson was a skilled welder, he lacked the background in business or manufacturing needed to capitalize on it. He had no initial capital, no factory infrastructure, and no experience in running a business. Nonetheless, as he reflected more on the possibilities, an exciting thought took hold. If the Navy was not interested in adopting his invention, perhaps private shipyards might be. During that period, Many shipyards along the West Coast were experiencing shortages of skilled labor and intense pressure to produce ships quickly, making them potential customers. On June 20, 1941, Ted Nelson made the decisive move of resigning from his position at the Mayor Island Naval Shipyard. His supervisor tried to dissuade him, cautioning that he was a talented and reliable welder and warning him not to abandon a stable job for what seemed like a risky and unproven innovation. But Nelson was resolute. He told Morrison directly that his goal was to develop welding guns, and he hoped that when the time came, Morrison would remember this conversation. With only $11 in his pocket and a garage full of tools, Nelson left the shipyard with a firm conviction that his invention would ultimately succeed. He wasted no time in formalizing his venture by establishing the Nelson Specialty Welding Equipment Corporation on the first day of July 1941. To fund his startup, he obtained a loan of $95,000 from the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, a government agency created during the Great Depression to lend support to small businesses. With this capital, he leased a modest workshop in Vallejo and began manufacturing his revolutionary stud welding guns. The first months proved to be challenging and discouraging. He had no existing customers or reputation, and he lacked an established distribution network. Determined to find buyers, Nelson conducted sales calls to local machine shops and small fabrication companies, demonstrating his device and explaining how much time it could save. Most potential clients were skeptical at first, hesitant to abandon their trusted methods for something new. However, a few were willing to give his prototype a try, ordering demonstration units. Over time, with patience and persistent effort, these initial efforts started to bear fruit. By September of 1941, Nelson had sold 18 welding guns along with several thousand flux-capped studs. Then, everything changed dramatically on December 7, 1941, a date that would mark a turning point in history: Pearl Harbor. The Japanese attack on the United States military base in Hawaii resulted in the destruction or damage of 8 battleships, 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and nearly 200 aircraft. The loss of life was devastating, with over 2,400 Americans killed. The nation was plunged into war, and the importance of shipbuilding suddenly became a matter of critical national survival. In the days immediately following Pearl Harbor, the entire shipbuilding industry erupted into frantic, urgent activity. The Kaiser shipyards ramped up production of Liberty ships at an unprecedented pace, striving to build vessels rapidly enough to meet wartime demands. The Mayor Island Naval Shipyard received emergency orders to begin constructing submarines, marking an expansion of its wartime role. Meanwhile, private companies such as Bethlehem Steel and many other shipyards along the coast faced immense pressure to increase their output, all under the shadow of a comprehensive mobilization effort. Nelson's innovative welding guns, once a small startup's dream, could now potentially play a vital part in the massive industrial effort to equip and supply the Navy, bringing his invention into the national spotlight. Yards across the country had suddenly been thrust into a relentless scramble, working triple shifts around the clock. Every single one of these shipbuilding facilities faced an identical challenge: how to construct ships at a pace that matched the urgent wartime demand. The conventional manufacturing techniques, which had served well in peacetime, proved painfully slow, exceedingly labor-intensive, and terribly inefficient when every day of delay could cost lives and resources. It was in this context that Ted Nelson's phone began ringing with a surprising frequency. For weeks prior, many shipyard purchasing agents had dismissed his innovative ideas, dismissing his inventions as impractical or irrelevant. Yet, as the pressure to accelerate ship production mounted, these same agents now found themselves eager to place substantial orders. The Kaiser shipyards, for example, ordered 50 welding guns and 10,000 studs, desperate for faster assembly methods. Bethlehem Steel followed suit, ordering 40 guns, while even the Mayor Island Naval Shipyard, where Nelson had been turned down just months before, placed an order for 60 guns and 20,000 studs. The process of fulfilling these orders fell into the capable hands of Morrison, Nelson's former supervisor, who handled the requisitions with pragmatic efficiency. There were no apologies or acknowledgments of Nelson's foresight. The orders arrived straightforwardly, accompanied only by a request for rapid delivery. By January of 1942, less than a month after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Nelson's modest workshop found itself overwhelmed, unable to keep pace with the surging demand. Orders flooded in faster than he could produce, revealing the urgent need for a dedicated factory, more space, more workers, and better equipment. Recognizing this necessity, Nelson leased a larger facility in San Leandro, just a few miles south of Oakland. The new building sat modestly amidst a vast cornfield, an isolated and unimposing structure. However, it offered ample space, sufficient power, and the potential for future expansion, crucial features for scaling up production. By March of 1942, Nelson had hired 20 workers. In just 3 months, this number had doubled to 40, then increased to 50 by June, and soaring to 150 by September. Operating around the clock, every day of the week, the factory churned out welding guns at an astonishing rate of 30 units daily, while stud production soared into the thousands each day. The impact on wartime shipbuilding was profound. Nearly every major shipyard along the West Coast adopted Nelson's stud welding technology. The results were astonishing and well documented. For example, a submarine deck installation, which previously required 12 workers and 6 days to complete, could now be performed by only 3 workers in a single day. The elimination of scaffolding, a significant time and labor saver, shaved off an additional 2 days from the process, freeing up workers to focus on other vital tasks. The advantages of Nelson's welds became increasingly evident. These welds, stronger than traditional bolted connections, allowed for easier removal and replacement of wooden deck planks, simplifying maintenance and repairs. At Mayor Island Naval Shipyard, the productivity of submarine construction skyrocketed. Between 1941 and 1945, the yard built 17 submarines, with each subsequent vessel taking less time to complete as the new techniques became standard practice. While stud welding was one of the most critical innovations in this surge of efficiency, it was not the only breakthrough. By mid-1942, Nelson's stud welding equipment was being employed beyond deck attachment. Its applications expanded to a multitude of uses. It became the go-to solution for attaching pipe hangers, cable supports, equipment mounts, and bulkhead attachments, anywhere a fastener needed to be securely affixed to steel structures. Initially, the Navy Bureau of Ships had dismissed Nelson's proposals, but as the benefits became undeniable, they began to study his process deeply. Engineering teams conducted rigorous analyses of weld strength, durability, and failure modes, confirming what Nelson had always believed. His welds were not only faster but also superior in both strength and reliability. The reliability of these welds proved to be essential for ship safety and operational efficiency. By the 19th of November in the year 1942, just 11 months after leaving his modest job paying him $11 a day, Nelson's innovative method had transformed shipbuilding. His contributions had accelerated production times dramatically, saving countless lives and resources, and cementing his place as a pivotal figure in wartime manufacturing. In the midst of his dedicated work on innovative welding techniques, Ted Nelson received an unexpected, yet highly significant, visit from a delegation of naval officers. Without prior warning, a group of 5 men dressed in formal military uniforms arrived at his manufacturing plant situated in San Leandro. Leading them was Captain Harrison, representing the Bureau of Ships, who took the lead in addressing Nelson directly. With a professional tone, Captain Harrison began, "Mr. Nelson, we are here to inform you that the Navy has completed its evaluation of your stud welding process. Our findings indicate that your groundbreaking invention has contributed to a tremendous saving of approximately 5 million man-hours in the construction of submarines and surface ships over the past 10 months. He paused briefly before continuing with a tone of appreciation. It is expected that this number will grow significantly as additional shipyards incorporate your technology into their manufacturing processes." After a moment of silence, Captain Harrison added, "On behalf of the Secretary of the Navy and the United States government, I am authorized to present you with a formal citation recognizing your exceptional contributions to the war effort." Nelson stood there, stunned by the implications of these words. Throughout his career, his ideas had been met with rejection, and his proposals often ignored or dismissed outright. He had been forced to leave his previous position, risking everything he had to prove the efficacy of his innovative welding process. Now, unexpectedly, he was being honored with official recognition. Noticing the conflicted expression on Nelson's face, Captain Harrison continued empathetically, "I understand that you submitted a proposal to Mayor Island in early 1941, Mr. Nelson. I have reviewed the relevant files. Unfortunately, your proposal was not properly evaluated at that time. That oversight was a mistake, and I apologize on behalf of the Navy." He paused briefly, then added, "However, your decision to develop the technology independently and outside the usual procurement channels has resulted in a much faster deployment, a feat that the normal process could not have achieved so swiftly. Sometimes, the most effective way to serve your country is to bypass bureaucracy and focus on solving the core problem directly." Nelson accepted the citation with a mixture of feelings: pride in the recognition of his achievement, a sense of vindication for his perseverance despite earlier setbacks, and a lingering frustration at the bureaucratic hurdles that nearly prevented this breakthrough from coming to fruition. Yet, amidst these complex emotions, the war pressed on. As the conflict intensified, so did the demand for ship production. Nelson's company continued to grow rapidly. By March of 1943, Nelson Specialty Welding Equipment Corporation had established a second manufacturing facility in Camden, New Jersey. This new plant on the East Coast supplied numerous shipyards along the Atlantic coast, including those located in New York, Philadelphia, Norfolk, and Charleston. By this time, the company employed over 400 workers, and its annual revenue approached an impressive $4 million. Ted Nelson himself was still working tirelessly, often putting in 16-hour days within the factory environment. He continued to dress in the workman's attire, tan pants and shirts, and drew a modest monthly salary of $1,000. All profits generated by the enterprise were reinvested into expanding the business, purchasing more equipment, and repaying loans, ensuring sustained growth. Despite his personal sacrifices, Nelson's contribution to the war effort was invaluable, extending far beyond what any initial estimates suggested. The initial assessment that his invention had saved roughly 5 million man-hours by late 1942 was merely the beginning. As the war advanced and the practice of stud welding became standardized in naval construction, the time savings grew exponentially. By 1943, Stud welding was not limited to submarines alone but had become integral in the construction of aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and numerous smaller vessels. For instance, the Essex-class aircraft carriers, built by major shipyards such as Newport News Shipbuilding, extensively depended on Nelson's stud welding technique for attaching flight decks and interior fittings. Each of these mighty ships, critical to the Navy's strategic capabilities, benefited immensely from the technological innovation Nelson had pioneered years earlier. This widespread adoption of stud welding marked a turning point in naval manufacturing, exemplifying how a single, innovative idea, once ignored, could revolutionize an entire industry and significantly contribute to national security during a time of war. During the intense period of World War II, the United States faced an urgent demand for a vast fleet of naval vessels and cargo ships to support its expansive military operations. To meet this challenge, approximately 20,000 studs, small metal fasteners, were required for the assembly of these ships. The Navy undertook large-scale construction projects, culminating in the production of 24 Essex-class aircraft carriers, each a formidable symbol of naval power. These massive carriers, constructed rapidly to bolster the fleet, vividly demonstrated the importance of efficient assembly techniques, including the use of stud welding. In particular, the Iowa-class battleships, renowned for their firepower and durability, employed stud welding extensively for securing their deck planking, mounting essential equipment, and attaching armor plating. The Baltimore-class heavy cruisers, another cornerstone of wartime naval strength, also incorporated this innovative technology throughout their design. The widespread application of stud welding across various ship types, ranging from destroyer escorts to landing ships, patrol boats, and other vessels, had a transformative effect on shipbuilding. This method enabled faster assembly, stronger joints, and ultimately a more resilient fleet that could be produced at unprecedented rates. Yet, the most remarkable transformation occurred in submarine construction, where the impact of stud welding was particularly profound. At the Mayor Island Naval Shipyard, once a place where Nelson's ideas had previously faced rejection, the technology became a cornerstone of efficiency. Over the course of the war, this facility built 17 submarines, with each successive vessel benefiting from reduced construction times and improved techniques. Similarly, the Port South Naval Shipyard in New Hampshire emerged as the leading submarine builder during this era. Between July of 1940 and July of 1945, Port South assembled a total of 79 submarines, a record that stood out in wartime production history. The success achieved at Port South was powered by multiple innovations, but most notably by the extensive adoption of stud welding. The yard utilized Nelson's system well beyond the deck, employing it throughout the interior of each submarine. This consistent application of the technology drastically accelerated the assembly process and enhanced structural integrity. The results were vividly reflected in the yard's impressive production statistics. On a single day, January 27, 1944, Port South launched 4 submarines: the Redfish, Ronquil, Razorback, and Scabbardfish, an extraordinary feat unmatched by any other shipyard before or since. At the height of its activity, Port South was completing approximately 32 submarines in a single year, which averages out to roughly 1 every 11 days. Focusing more specifically on the submarines of the Ballo class, which made up the majority of the wartime fleet, the construction timeline from keel laying to commissioning at Portsmouth was about 12 months. This was several months faster than comparable yards building the same class, thanks in large part to the efficiencies introduced by stud welding and other innovative techniques. Across the country, The Electric Boat Company in Groton, Connecticut, built 74 submarines, while Mantarock Shipbuilding in Wisconsin, despite being located hundreds of miles inland on the Great Lakes, managed to complete 28 submarines. These were floated down the Mississippi River toward the Gulf of Mexico, illustrating the extraordinary logistical efforts supporting wartime production. In total, the United States constructed 203 submarines during the war, a staggering number reflecting the nation's industrial might. Each of these submarines incorporated thousands of stud-welded attachments, an essential element in their construction. The simple act of welding a stud saved minutes of labor for each joint, but when multiplied across thousands of studs per vessel and several hundred submarines built, the overall time savings and efficiency gains became monumental. This technological leap significantly contributed to the rapid expansion of the submarine fleet, enhancing the U.S. Navy's ability to deploy these vessels in critical wartime missions. However, submarines represented only part of the broader wartime shipbuilding effort. The volume of surface ships and merchant vessels produced was equally staggering. The Liberty Ship Program, overseen by the Maritime Commission and primarily executed at Kaiser shipyards, produced an astonishing 2,710 cargo ships during the war. Each Liberty ship required approximately 5,000 to 8,000 stud-welded attachments, securing deck planking, cargo handling gear, defensive gun mounts, and various fittings. The Victory ships, an evolution of the Liberty design, were built to similar standards but with increased speed and efficiency. The scale of this production effort was unparalleled in human history, reflecting an almost unimaginable level of industrial coordination. In 1943, during the peak of Liberty ship construction, American shipyards managed to launch 3 new vessels every single day. This translated to roughly 75 ships each month, culminating in approximately 900 ships annually. Such rapid and continuous output underscored the massive logistical and technological achievement that the United States had accomplished in its wartime shipbuilding campaign, driven in part by innovations like stud welding that made it all possible. The achievement was made possible only through a series of radical innovations in construction techniques that transformed the shipbuilding industry during wartime. These advancements included the widespread adoption of prefabrication processes, modular assembly methods, the deployment of specialized labor, the use of dedicated tools, and the development of quicker attachment techniques. Among these groundbreaking innovations, stud welding stood out as a critical component of a broader revolution aimed at significantly enhancing efficiency in ship construction. This particular technique played a vital role in streamlining assembly processes, particularly by eliminating the need for traditional scaffolding, which in turn freed up workers to focus on other essential tasks within the construction timeline. The increase in installation speed dramatically shortened the time required to assemble ships, allowing for faster deployment of naval vessels crucial for wartime needs. Moreover, the strength and dependability of the welds produced through these advances ensured that ships constructed rapidly and with less scaffolding could still withstand the brutal onslaughts of North Atlantic storms as well as potential enemy attacks. By the spring of 1943, the United States Navy had officially taken notice of Nelson's substantial contributions to this technological leap forward. On the 11th of May, 1943, the Secretary of the Navy formally recognized Nelson Specialty Welding Equipment Corporation by presenting them with the prestigious Army-Navy E Award for Excellence in Production, a significant honor during the wartime period. This award, first established in July of 1942, was designed to honor companies whose manufacturing facilities demonstrated exceptional performance in producing military equipment at both high quality and large quantities. Receiving this distinction was exceedingly rare, with only about 5% of companies involved in war production earning such recognition, underscoring its prestige. The award came in the form of a pennant to be displayed at the factory, along with individual pins awarded to all employees as a token of appreciation. The ceremony was held at the Nelson plant in San Leandro and was conducted with full military honors, attended by Navy officers, representatives from the Army, and local officials. The factory workers, Nelson's dedicated employees, who had endured long, grueling hours in order to meet the pressing demands of wartime production, received their pins with immense pride and a deep sense of accomplishment. Ted Nelson, standing before his hard-working team dressed in his usual work attire, accepted the pennant and delivered a heartfelt speech. In his words, their efforts were not driven by the pursuit of awards or recognition but by a profound sense of duty to their country. He emphasized that every stud welded, every gun assembled, every component produced helped sailors and soldiers return home safely, and that such contributions were the true reward for their labor. Their collective effort had a direct impact on the war effort, and that was all the recognition they needed. The Navy's recognition of Nelson's achievement did not end there. For companies that maintained an outstanding level of performance for a continuous period of at least 6 months following the initial award, additional honors were granted in the form of a star added to their pennant. Nelson's company earned its first star in November of 1943, signaling sustained excellence. A second star was awarded in May of 1944, further cementing their reputation for consistent high performance in wartime manufacturing. By the conclusion of the war, Nelson Specialty Welding Equipment Corporation stood among a select few companies to have received not just 1 but 2 awards, each with stars attached, an extraordinary achievement. Official citations highlighted the tremendous impact of their work, estimating that their innovations had saved approximately 50 million man-hours of labor in naval construction alone. Let that staggering figure sink in. 50 million hours equate to roughly 5,700 years of continuous work. To put it into perspective, if a single individual worked 8 hours a day without interruption, it would take over 19,000 years to accumulate that amount of work time. This monumental time savings resulted from a single, simple yet revolutionary invention, a spring-loaded welding gun complemented by a ceramic flux cap. The efficiency gains achieved through this innovation meant that ships could be built and launched much faster, directly translating into more submarines patrolling the Japanese convoys, additional destroyers escorting vital shipping routes, and more aircraft carriers launching offensive strikes. It also meant faster deployment of landing ships ferrying Marines onto hostile beaches, increasing the overall combat power of the fleet. Every day that ships went into the water sooner represented a significant strategic advantage: increased naval strength, more supplies delivered to front lines, and countless lives saved. This strategic advantage, born from a commitment to innovation and efficiency, exemplified how technological progress and dedicated effort could profoundly influence the course of a global conflict. The impact of that single act was truly difficult to measure in mere numbers, yet its significance became even more apparent through an unexpected advantage it conferred. Nelson's innovative stud welding technology proved to be remarkably accessible, requiring far less expertise than traditional methods such as bolt fastening or conventional welding. This meant that even workers with minimal training could quickly learn to operate the stud welding equipment safely and effectively, a factor that turned out to be vital as the war effort intensified and the demand for labor skyrocketed. As the conflict deepened, the American shipyards experienced a dramatic surge in workforce diversity, with women stepping into roles previously thought to be reserved for men. The iconic image of Rosie the Riveter captured the spirit of this transformation, symbolizing the enormous contribution of female workers to the war effort. However, beyond Rosie, numerous women, sometimes referred to affectionately as Wendy the Welders, became indispensable on the shipbuilding front lines. They operated stud welding guns, installed deck planking, mounted essential equipment, and quickly became highly skilled at their craft. The scale of employment reflected this shift. At its peak, the Mayor Island Naval Shipyard employed nearly 50,000 workers, of whom about 9,000 were women. Similarly, Kaiser's extensive shipbuilding operation employed hundreds of thousands of workers across multiple yards, with women comprising nearly 30% of the entire workforce. These women needed tools and processes that could be learned rapidly and applied safely in demanding environments. Stud welding fit these criteria perfectly, facilitating rapid skill acquisition and safe operation even under pressing conditions. By the year of our Lord 1944, the strategic landscape had shifted decisively in favor of the Allies. American industrial capacity had surpassed the combined efforts of Axis powers, producing more ships, aircraft, tanks, and artillery than Germany and Japan could muster collectively. The United States had become known as the arsenal of democracy, a phrase coined by President Franklin D. Roosevelt to describe this unmatched level of industrial productivity. This colossal manufacturing effort was not merely a matter of numbers, it was a crucial factor in the unfolding victory. Ted Nelson's stud welding guns, though small components within this vast industrial machinery, played a vital role in the overall war effort. Every small part contributed to greater efficiency, which in wartime is directly linked to lives saved and battles won. Faster ship construction meant a larger naval force could be deployed sooner, which translated into more Japanese shipping being sunk, more strategic islands captured, and increased pressure exerted on the enemy. The Pacific Submarine Campaign vividly demonstrated this, as American submarines sank over 1,000 Japanese merchant ships, amounting to roughly 5 million tons of shipping. They also destroyed 1 aircraft carrier, 8 battleships, numerous cruisers, and destroyers, an impressive tally that was only possible because the United States built submarines faster than Japan could sink them. At the start of the war, Japan possessed a larger submarine fleet than the U.S. Navy, but its production was limited. During the course of hostilities, Japan constructed only 126 submarines, while America built 203, significantly more. Every month of accelerated submarine construction was a crucial advantage. Each week that a new submarine joined the fleet meant another week during which American forces could hunt enemy shipping. The pattern of rapid shipbuilding extended beyond submarines to aircraft carriers, exemplified by the progression of the Essex class. In December of 1941, the United States Navy had only 7 aircraft carriers. By the end of the war, in August of 1945, that number had grown to an astonishing 99, encompassing various classes and types. The Essex-class carriers formed the core of this expansion. 24 of these powerful vessels were completed, each capable of carrying up to 90 aircraft. From mid-1943 onward, the fast carrier task forces built around Essex-class ships came to dominate the Pacific theater. These mighty ships not only shelled Japanese positions and launched airstrikes but also provided vital air cover during amphibious landings and engaged Japanese naval forces in decisive battles. One such confrontation, the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June of 1944, saw American carrier aircraft completely decimate over 600 Japanese planes, an event that pilots famously dubbed the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, underscoring the scale of the destruction wrought upon Japanese air power. The victory in a pivotal campaign was made achievable mainly due to the United States possessing a greater number of aircraft carriers positioned strategically at the critical moment. The rapid pace of shipbuilding during the war allowed for swifter deployment of these vital vessels, which played an instrumental role in turning the tides of battles. For example, the invasion of Normandy, known as D-Day, launched on June 6, 1944, required an astonishing 7,000 ships and landing craft to carry out the amphibious assault. This colossal armada, the largest ever assembled for an amphibious attack in human history, was only feasible because American and British shipyards worked tirelessly to produce thousands of landing craft. These vessels were quite rudimentary in design, flat-bottomed boats built specifically to be beached and unload cargo directly onto hostile shores. Despite their simplicity, the construction of such a vast number of landing ships demanded innovations in manufacturing, ensuring that they could be built rapidly and fitted reliably in large quantities. In this context, stud welding technology proved to be an ideal solution for the assembly of landing craft. This technique made it possible to swiftly attach cargo ramps, davit mounts, and various deck fittings securely and efficiently. The technology, initially developed for attaching components on submarine decks by Nelson's team, found extensive application throughout the entire fleet of landing craft. Its reliability and speed significantly enhanced the production process, helping meet the enormous wartime demands. As victory in Europe was secured in May of 1945, the focus of military effort shifted entirely toward the Pacific theater. The United States prepared for a planned invasion of Japan, codenamed Operation Downfall, which was scheduled to commence in November of the same year. This proposed invasion would require an unprecedented scale of logistics, including more ships, a greater number of landing craft, and expanded support systems than any previous military campaign had demanded. Shipyards across the nation eagerly prepared for another surge in production, gearing up for what was anticipated to be an even larger mobilization. However, in early August of 1945, history took a dramatic turn. 2 atomic bombs were dropped on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6 and 9, respectively. The devastation was overwhelming, and news of Japan's surrender soon followed. On August 15, 1945, World War II formally came to an end, bringing relief to the war-weary nations. With the conclusion of hostilities, the enormous machinery of wartime military production began to wind down rapidly. Contracts for military equipment were cancelled en masse, and thousands of workers found themselves laid off. Many shipyards either shut down permanently or pivoted to civilian manufacturing, converting their facilities to meet peacetime demands. Companies like the Nelson Specialty Welding Equipment Corporation faced an uncertain future as their military orders dried up almost overnight. At its peak, Nelson's firm had employed over 400 workers, a testament to its significant role during the war effort. Now, however, it stood on the brink of potential collapse. Yet, Ted Nelson, the company's founder, had anticipated such a scenario. During the war years, he had dedicated time to exploring how stud welding technology could be adapted for civilian applications, recognizing that its benefits extended well beyond shipbuilding. Stud welding was not limited solely to assembling ships. It held considerable promise for any industry involved in steel fabrication. Construction companies, bridge builders, manufacturers of buildings, tanks, pressure vessels, and automobiles could all benefit from faster, more reliable attachment methods that this technology offered. The possibilities appeared almost limitless, and Nelson set out to pivot his business toward these emerging markets. He began actively marketing his stud welding systems to construction firms, steel fabricators, and industrial manufacturers, emphasizing the efficiency and strength of his technology. The post-war boom in construction provided fertile ground for this new focus. America was rapidly expanding its infrastructure, building highways, bridges, skyscrapers, and suburban neighborhoods, all of which required extensive steel work and dependable attachment techniques. By the year of 1948, Nelson's company had successfully transitioned from wartime to peacetime production. Although the scale of the operation was certainly smaller than during the height of the war, the business was now stable and steadily growing. Nelson's team continued to innovate, developing new designs for studs, creating improved welding guns, and exploring specialized applications tailored to different industries' needs. In 1950, Nelson made a strategic decision to sell his company to TRW, a large industrial conglomerate with diverse holdings in various technological sectors. The sale provided Nelson with financial security and allowed him to retire from active management of the firm. Nevertheless, the Nelson name remained prominently associated with the products. TRW continued to market and develop Nelson's stud welding equipment, preserving the brand recognition that Nelson had diligently built over the years. As the decades passed, the company changed ownership multiple times, each transition reflecting broader shifts in industrial technology and manufacturing. Yet, the core principles of innovation and quality that Nelson had espoused persisted, ensuring that his legacy endured long after he stepped back from the business. The story of Nelson's invention extends far beyond mere numbers and industry statistics. It is a testament to innovation that has stood the test of time and transformed multiple fields. Over the years, the Nelson brand has persisted through numerous corporate changes and ownership transfers. Originally developed in a modest garage in Vallejo by Ted Nelson himself, the revolutionary stud welding technology has been passed down and refined through several corporate entities. In the year 2000, the company TRW was the first to acquire the Nelson brand, marking the beginning of a new chapter in its corporate journey. Subsequently, in 2007, Farsantech Incorporated took ownership, further expanding the technological reach and market presence of Nelson products. Later, in 2018, Stanley Black & Decker, a giant in the industrial tools and hardware sector, purchased the division specializing in industrial fasteners, ensuring the technology's refinement and continued global distribution. Despite all these corporate transitions, the core identity of the Nelson brand and its pioneering technology remained intact. Today, Stanley Engineered Fastening continues to manufacture and market Nelson stud welding products worldwide, demonstrating the enduring relevance and adaptability of Nelson's original insights. Remarkably, the technology that Ted Nelson developed in his humble garage has retained its fundamental principles and continues to be employed across the globe. Modern stud welding has evolved into a highly sophisticated process, surpassing the simplicity of Nelson's initial design. The advent of inverter power supplies allows for extraordinarily precise control of the electrical arc, enhancing both safety and efficiency. Automating the process has made it possible to handle high-volume production with ease, something unimaginable at the start. In automated manufacturing environments, robotic welders now swiftly and accurately apply studs in complex assembly lines, such as those found in automotive manufacturing plants. Nevertheless, the core concept remains consistent: a stud, a flux cap, a spring-loaded gun, and an electrical arc, applied in roughly 1 second per individual stud. One of the most appealing features of modern stud welding is its ability to operate without the necessity for scaffolding or extensive preparatory work. This convenience has led to its adoption in fields well beyond its original naval and shipbuilding purposes. Today, construction workers routinely use stud welding to affix metal decking to steel frameworks in towering skyscrapers, providing a quick and secure method to assemble structural elements. Bridge builders utilize it for installing guardrail posts and mounting lighting systems, while nuclear power facilities depend on it to secure cable trays and critical equipment supports. In the automotive industry, stud welding is integral throughout vehicle assembly, used for grounding points and attaching interior and exterior trim parts with remarkable speed and reliability. The technological revolution initiated by Ted Nelson, originally conceived to solve a specific naval construction challenge, has, quite unexpectedly, found its way into nearly every industry that works with steel. This widespread application highlights the flexibility and robustness of Nelson's invention. However, one of the most emotionally compelling legacies of Nelson's work can be observed in the preservation and restoration of historic ships. The battleship Texas, one of only 7 surviving vessels that served in both the First and Second World Wars, is currently undergoing extensive restoration at a dry dock facility. The project involves repairing corroded hull plates and replacing deteriorated fittings, tasks that require the most precise and reliable welding methods available. The restoration team discovered that modern Nelson stud welding equipment is perfectly suited for this purpose, allowing them to attach new steel plates efficiently using the very technology Ted Nelson pioneered nearly 8 decades ago. Similarly, the submarine USS Pompanito, which served in World War II and now stands preserved in San Francisco, relies on Nelson's stud welding technology for ongoing maintenance. This historic vessel, located at the Embarcadero, attracts over 100,000 visitors each year, eager to explore its storied past. Maintaining the safety and integrity of the boat is a continual challenge, one that is made much more manageable thanks to the efficiency and simplicity of Nelson's invention. The equipment allows volunteer restoration crews, often lacking certified welders, to perform necessary welding tasks quickly and effectively, ensuring the vessel remains preserved for future generations. Ted Nelson himself lived long enough to see his invention's profound impact extending far beyond his original expectations. He witnessed his stud welding process become a standard practice in shipbuilding, adopted worldwide across diverse industries. Nelson saw his name become virtually synonymous with a specific welding process, a mark of his lasting contribution to the field of engineering. He passed away in the year 1994 at the remarkable age of 89, having lived through and observed some of the most significant transformations in history, witnessing the end of the Cold War and the rapid modernization of the world his generation fought to preserve. While the impressive statistics associated with Nelson's achievements, 50 million man-hours saved, 2 Army-Navy awards, thousands of ships built more rapidly, and billions of studs manufactured, offer only a glimpse into the scope of his influence, they cannot fully encapsulate the depth of his legacy. Every steel structure erected, every historic ship restored, and every industrial process improved by this technology echoes the spirit of innovation and the outcomes that truly mattered to him. These tangible results spoke volumes more than any public recognition ever could. Ted Nelson's journey exemplifies a profound truth about innovation. Sometimes, the greatest contributions come from individuals who refuse to be deterred by skepticism or rejection, focusing instead on transforming ideas into real, impactful solutions. Throughout history, countless innovators have faced dismissal and doubt from the established authorities or prevailing systems that prefer the status quo. The pioneering efforts of Wilbur and Orville Wright, who were met with incredulity when they claimed that powered flight was achievable, serve as a classic example. Despite widespread skepticism, their persistence and ingenuity ultimately revolutionized transportation. Similarly, Henry Ford encountered derision when he proposed the concept of mass-producing automobiles, an idea that was dismissed by many as impractical at the time. Yet his vision eventually reshaped industries and societies worldwide. Chester Carlson, after years of perseverance, struggled to find a market for his revolutionary xerography process. His journey was marked by relentless effort and resilience, eventually culminating in the acceptance and widespread adoption of his invention, which transformed the printing industry. What distinguished Nelson from many others was his unwavering refusal to accept rejection as final. Unlike those who argued or became discouraged, he chose to act decisively. He left his steady job, invested his own savings into his idea, and proved its viability through concrete results. His bold approach exemplifies the core of American innovation, a willingness to challenge norms, bypass bureaucratic hurdles, and prioritize problem-solving over permission. Nelson's story also highlights a fundamental principle. True progress often comes from those who dare to take risks and follow their conviction, even when faced with institutional resistance. His innovative welding technique, which ultimately saved countless man-hours, exemplifies how practical solutions can emerge from perseverance and a refusal to accept limitations imposed by tradition or skepticism. The legacy of Nelson's work is intertwined with the history of the Mayor Island Naval Shipyard, where he was employed and whose management initially rejected his idea. This shipyard, with a rich history stretching over 142 years before its closure in 1996, played a vital role in maritime history. Over its extensive operational period, the yard constructed more than 512 ships and undertook the repair of thousands more. Among its most notable achievements was the construction of 44 submarines, including the USS Drum, the last nuclear submarine built in California, which was launched in 1970. Recognized for its historic significance, the shipyard was designated a California Historical Landmark in 1960, and parts of it, including the dry docks and various industrial structures, were recognized nationally in 1975. Today, the site of this once bustling shipyard has undergone transformation. It is being carefully redeveloped into a vibrant commercial and residential district that preserves its historical essence. Several of the original buildings remain, offering a glimpse into its storied past. Visitors can walk through these preserved structures, the chapels, dry docks, and industrial complexes, and imagine the frantic activity of the war years when tens of thousands of workers labored tirelessly around the clock, building and repairing submarines that defended their country. Within the old pipe shop, known as Building 46, which operated until 1984, a small museum now stands. This museum displays tools, photographs, and artifacts that narrate the shipyard's history and its vital contributions. However, there is no specific exhibit dedicated to Ted Nelson or the remarkable innovation that revolutionized welding techniques and ultimately saved 50 million man-hours. His story remains largely forgotten outside the circles of welding professionals and maritime historians, a quiet reminder of how individual achievements can sometimes fade into obscurity despite their immense impact. Nelson's indifference to fame and recognition was characteristic of his pragmatic approach. He was motivated solely by the desire to solve a pressing problem, making industrial processes more efficient and, in turn, saving lives. The successful implementation of his solution, which drastically reduced the time and effort required to build submarines, was a testament to his dedication. It not only transformed an industry but also contributed significantly to national efforts during wartime. For Nelson, the acknowledgement of his work was secondary. The real reward lay in knowing that his innovation truly made a difference in the world. His story embodies the essence of ingenuity: identifying a challenge, developing an effective solution, and having the courage to pursue it, regardless of institutional resistance. It is a testament to the power of individual initiative and perseverance, values that have driven countless breakthroughs throughout history and continue to do so today. Nelson's life and work stand as a compelling reminder that progress often begins with one person's willingness to challenge norms, take risks, and focus solely on making things better for everyone. Rewarding enough, perhaps, but the story carries a vital lesson for every generation that follows. Truly transformative innovation often emerges from the most unexpected places and unforeseen sources. It doesn't always originate from credentialed experts or well-established research institutions. Instead, it frequently comes from everyday working individuals who face challenges and see problems firsthand every single day. These are the people who understand what needs fixing because they deal with the issues directly, and their insights can lead to groundbreaking solutions. Innovations are not solely born within the walls of corporate laboratories where meticulous experiments are conducted under controlled settings. Instead, many of the most impactful ideas come from humble garage workshops and makeshift personal spaces, where amateur tinkerers and inventors work tirelessly, experimenting and refining prototypes until they discover something truly novel. Sometimes, these efforts seem insignificant at first glance, but with persistence and creativity, they can produce revolutionary results. The true source of innovation is often the individual willing to take a risk on an idea they strongly believe in, even if that idea is dismissed or overlooked by the mainstream or official channels. The next world-changing innovation could very well come from a welder in a busy shipyard, a mechanic working diligently in a cluttered garage, a nurse in a hospital ward, or a teacher in a classroom. It might originate from someone who is deemed unqualified by formal standards, or from an individual whom bureaucrats instruct to strictly follow procedures, or from an expert who dismisses their efforts as a futile waste of time. Yet, history presents us with countless examples illustrating the importance of listening to these unconventional sources. Not because every idea they propose will be successful, but because the few ideas that do succeed can alter the course of history. Take, for instance, Ted Nelson's ceramic flux capacitor, a seemingly small ceramic piece, paired with his simple spring-loaded welding gun. These modest tools, when combined, led to enormous practical benefits. They eliminated the need for scaffolding, sped up production processes, enhanced safety measures, improved overall quality, and hastened ship manufacturing during a critical period. This innovation, born from an overlooked idea, ultimately saved approximately 50 million man-hours, equivalent to over 5,700 years of work. That is a staggering amount of time saved by what was initially dismissed as an insignificant adjustment. But that figure only accounts for the direct time saved during construction. The profound strategic impact extends far beyond that simple calculation. Faster ship deployment meant submarines could reach the Pacific theater sooner, saving lives and changing the outcome of crucial battles. It improved morale among the workforce and boosted production goals well beyond expectations. It also contributed to the rapid expansion of American naval power, surprising enemies and deterring potential threats. In essence, the full weight of Ted Nelson's invention and its ripple effects are immeasurable, yet it is clear that America's victory in World War II was as much rooted in industrial innovation and capacity as it was in military strength and courage. The soldiers, sailors, and marines fought bravely on the front lines, but the war's decisive. Victories were won by the raw ingenuity of workers, engineers, and visionaries, people like Ted Nelson, who identified a problem and found a way to fix it. They refused to accept inefficiency or accept that certain improvements were impossible, realizing that in a total war, every minute saved in production translated directly into lives saved on the battlefield. As we face the complex challenges of the 21st century, climate change, dwindling resources, crumbling infrastructure, this lesson remains as vital as ever. Addressing these global issues will require innovative thinking at every level of society. Breakthroughs won't only come from elite universities or large corporate research labs. Instead, they will frequently originate from the dedicated, observant working people who see problems clearly and develop practical, workable solutions. The next Ted Nelson might be a young engineer designing a more efficient solar panel right in a garage workshop. Or it could be a factory worker who recognizes precisely where time and energy are being wasted and finds a way to eliminate those inefficiencies. The next revolutionary idea in productivity or safety might emerge from someone whom official channels have already dismissed as unqualified or incapable. Therefore, it is imperative that we listen more attentively to these unconventional sources of innovation. We need to foster an environment where inventive thinking from all corners of society is encouraged and supported. We must also work diligently to reduce the barriers, whether bureaucratic, financial, or social, that hinder promising ideas from reaching their full potential. By doing so, we open the door for the next generation of inventors and problem solvers, people who, in quiet workshops or bustling factories, will create the solutions that propel us into a better future. The journey from recognizing a problem to developing a solution often involves a critical period of insight, experimentation, and perseverance. History has repeatedly shown that some of the most groundbreaking innovations were born outside the confines of formal systems, driven by individuals who refused to accept the status quo simply because the established authorities or institutions turned a deaf ear. These pioneers often operated on the fringes, motivated by a genuine desire to improve, innovate, or solve an urgent problem that others overlooked or dismissed. Take, for instance, Ted Nelson, a man whose early days were humble and unassuming. He began his career as an ordinary welder earning just $11 a day. Despite his modest beginnings, he eventually rose to become a millionaire industrialist, thanks to his pioneering technology that played a significant role in advancing his country's industrial capability. Yet, throughout his life, Nelson remained deeply connected to his roots. He never flaunted wealth or status. He never sought to surround himself with inherited privileges or titles. Instead, he identified as a mechanic, a person who saw a specific problem and dedicated himself tirelessly to fixing it. In the later years of his life, when colleagues and admirers inquired about the secret behind his success, Nelson would often respond with modesty, saying, "I just made a better mousetrap. The world beat a path to my door." His achievement was not a product of extraordinary genius but rather a testament to common sense, applied at precisely the right moment, with enough courage and persistence to see it through. It underscores a vital lesson: that practical, straightforward ideas, when executed with conviction, can indeed alter the course of history. Ted Nelson's true legacy extends far beyond the tangible outcomes, such as the 50 million hours saved or the 2 prestigious awards he received, or even the global company that still bears his name today. His enduring contribution lies in the proof that an individual with a good idea, coupled with the determination to bring it to life, can create something impactful. Every time a welder activates a stud welding gun, Every time a ship is assembled more efficiently than ever before, or when someone questions existing methods, seeking a better way, Nelson's influence persists. Back in 1941, Nelson asked the fundamental question that many innovators still ask themselves. There has to be a better way. His answer, developed through insight and resilience, helped contribute to winning a war, showing how a single question can lead to solutions with far-reaching consequences. Today, we should reflect on what questions we are posing. Are we challenging the inefficiencies and limitations around us? Are we daring to think differently, even when conventional wisdom suggests it cannot be done? The critical test of an innovator's courage often comes when experts dismiss ideas as impossible, when bureaucrats insist on following rigid procedures, or when skeptics scoff at proposals that seem unorthodox. During such moments, the true question becomes whether you have the resolve to prove them wrong. History's greatest inventions frequently emerged from the willingness to ignore those who say it cannot be done, trusting personal observations and conviction instead. Ted Nelson exemplified that mindset perfectly. His conviction and boldness have allowed his invention to be used by welders across the globe every single day, nearly 80 years later. Somewhere, perhaps in a humble garage or a cluttered workshop, the next visionary is sketching out an idea that others dismiss as impractical or impossible. But history shows that the most transformative innovations are not born from strict adherence to routine procedures. They are the result of seeing a problem clearly, knowing how to fix it, and refusing to take no for an answer. In the end, the path to meaningful change often requires a willingness to defy expectations, challenge skepticism, and follow one's own observations. Just as Ted Nelson did decades ago, future innovators will need to ask tough questions, trust their intuition, and have the courage to pursue solutions that others deem unfeasible. Because, more often than not, it is precisely those daring to challenge the norm who will leave the greatest mark on history.